Welcome to the Montgomery Counseling Group Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Ankita, and today we are diving into a topic that touches so many lives: body image, trauma, and how they are deeply connected in today's world. I'm super excited to kick things off today with someone really special, Laura Greer, a therapist who specializes in trauma, recovery, body image healing, and self compassion. Laura, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's great. So, before we jump into the heavy stuff, Laura, can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to focus on trauma and body image in your work?
Yes, definitely. So I can start off when originally I'm from Greenville, South Carolina, and I went to undergraduate school in upstate New York. And after that, I moved to New York City, and I was working in the corporate world for a number of years until out of the blue, in my late 20s, I had a stroke. And after going through that experience and having, luckily, a full recovery, I realized that there was a real need to provide mental health care. So I thought I realized that there was a real need for mental health care for individuals who had experienced traumatic medical events. And so I made the decision to go to grad school to pursue my MSW so that I could work with those individuals as a therapist. So in grad school, I had different internships. I worked with individuals whose infants were admitted to the NICU in a hospital setting. And so I worked with them a lot of grief and trauma surrounding that experience. And then I, for my second year internship in grad school, worked with individuals who were diagnosed with ALS. And so I provided individual, couples, and family therapy to those clients. And then I graduated with my MSW, and unfortunately, 2 months following my graduation, my husband sustained a severe traumatic brain injury. And so that left me that essentially I became his primary caregiver overnight. And that experience, in addition to my experience having had a stroke and gone through recovery, really solidified my desire to and motivation to work with people who had experienced medical trauma. Also, it kind of then led into working with individuals with a variety of traumatic experiences. And so after that, I continued to be his primary caregiver, and I since then have worked in various settings as a mental health therapist. I've worked in an outpatient mental health clinic that was part of a hospital setting in New Jersey. I worked for a private practice, and now I'm working for Montgomery Counseling Group. So that's my background.
Yeah, that's really so powerful. And I think it's amazing how personal experiences often guide us into the work we are meant to do, right?
Yes.
And honestly, today, with all the pressures people are facing, social media, beauty standards, health scares, I feel like body image struggles and trauma are more relevant than ever.
Yes, definitely. And I should also mention that what led me into kind of the intersection of trauma and work with body image was my personal experience with the medical trauma, and also my lived experience as an individual who is in recovery and has been in recovery from an eating disorder for many years. And that led me to learn all about the intersection of trauma and body image, but also the health at every size framework of care. So I can talk to you a little. I know we can talk about that maybe a little later, but
yeah, sure. Like we have some questions related to that, so we can discuss about it later on. And yeah, absolutely. So to set the foundation for everyone listening to us, how would you define trauma and how does it tie into body image issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. So trauma is really, I mean, it can be defined differently, but my understanding of trauma is that it's really anything that happens to us that overwhelms our ability or our capacity to live normally. It overwhelms our nervous system and causes significant issues in normal functioning. And how that intersects with body image can happen in a lot of different ways. I think it's important to mention that just because an individual experiences issues with body image, food and body image, does not mean that they necessarily have a trauma history. It's very possible, and it happens all the time, that people have food and body image issues and do not have a history of trauma. And we do know that people who experience trauma often struggle with food and body image issues more often.
Right.
So, and that can be due to a variety of reasons, including, but certainly not limited to, growing up in an environment, for example, where a person has very little control over their environment, or they grow up in like a very inconsistent household, inconsistent environment, or unpredictable or unsafe environment. And so the only thing that they may have control over is their food intake. And so if you think about that, that can often kind of result in what looks like over control of, and that can, because that's the one kind of area that they can control. So that's one way that trauma can directly, result in some food issues. And then another way is that trauma often can involve the body directly. The body can be involved in traumatic experiences. And when that is the case, often individuals learn to kind of disconnect from the body in order to survive. And so that can look like dissociation, and also it can look like not being in tune with your own hunger and fullness cues, because you're disconnected. So that can also result in some disordered eating patterns. So those are just some of the ways that trauma intersects with food and body image.
Yeah, completely get it. And it's really wild when you think about it, like how a single experience or even years of subtle messages from the world can totally shape how someone sees their body.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We are surrounded, we are bombarded with, we live in a society that is rampant with fat phobia and size discrimination. The systems that we live in are quite literally not built to accommodate individuals in larger bodies. And unfortunately, we see a lot of weight discrimination and harm being caused even in like in the medical industry. So I work with a lot of clients who go to the doctor. They're told automatically, if they're in a larger body, that their health issues must be related to their weight, without real consideration for the fact that there's a lot of research to show that weight is not actually an indicator of health.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and I'm happy to talk more about that with the Health at Every Size framework.
Right. So like when you throw societal pressures into the mix, the constant messaging about how we are supposed to look, it's honestly no wonder that so many people struggle with how they feel in their own skin.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely. But so the other thing to think about is how much like we're bombarded with images of kind of a specific body type,
Mhm.
and that is typically white, thin, and able-bodied. And so if you are an individual who falls outside of that, specific body type, then you kind of automatically you're gonna run into discrimination in our society.
Right.
And then you have the media bombarding you with these images of this specific body type, and then there's the association of that specific kind of body ideal in quotes. um, there's that association between that body ideal or that specific body type and health, when again there's no actual research to show that being in a smaller body automatically equals health.
Yeah, I completely agree to what you have said right now. And I love that you work for a trauma informed perspective. Can you explain for our listeners what exactly is trauma informed therapy and how does it help people dealing with body made challenges?
Yes, so trauma informed therapy really just means that the therapist is considering how trauma impacts the person's overall well-being. So it's the consideration of trauma and how that shows up and how that impacts the person. And so in trauma-informed therapy, some of the goals are to really try to provide a safe enough environment for the client, and meeting the client where they are in the process. So, if a client comes in and they're not willing at this point to give up dieting, they're coming in for body image issues, I'm not going to push them or pressure them to give up dieting. I'm going to meet them where they are. I'm going to respect, client autonomy. And also in food and body image work, there's also this, it's important to consider body autonomy, what the client wishes to do or chooses not to do with their own body. That's something that as a therapist who's trauma informed, I'm going to respect. I'm going to go at their own pace. The other piece of trauma informed therapy is the importance of not doing your best to not cause any re-traumatization in sessions, and to pace the session, pace the therapy so that trust and safety is built up over time.
Right. That's so empowering. Like just being seen and supported without judgment, right? Like it makes a huge difference.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you are a big advocate for health at every size and intuitive eating. So can you talk a little about what those are and how they help people build a healthier relationship with their bodies? Like you were also mentioning about your eating habit as well. So you can just add on to this right now.
Yeah, I love talking about health at every size. I'm a huge advocate because I've seen how it's been so impactful for me personally, but also for the clients that I've worked with. So health at every size is a framework of care that's grounded in liberatory and social justice movements. And it argues that people in all body sizes deserve respect and equal access to healthcare. So if you're a health at every size informed provider or advocate, you are essentially saying that you are advocating for policies that reduce weight stigma in society.
Right.
So as a health at every size therapist, I use an anti-diet and a weight and size inclusive approach to the work that I'm doing with clients who are struggling with food and body image issues. And so the health at every size approach really, it moves away from focusing on weight and body size and moves toward integrating what we call health promoting behaviors. So those behaviors might look like actively working on ways to reduce overall stress in the client's life, improving sleep hygiene, incorporating a wide variety of foods into your diet, and that includes higher calorie foods that I kind of refer to as fun foods, as opposed to junk food or bad foods. So it's also focuses on taking morality out of food. So it's not so black and white. There's no good food and bad food.
Right.
And then it can also, some other health promoting behaviors include focusing on like what we call gentle movement. So activity, physical movement that feels supportive to your body. And then a big piece of it is advocating for yourself when you counter weight stigma. So I work clients, on specific responses and questions they can ask when they go to the doctor. If they're going to take a flight and they're worried about not being able to fit into the seat, thinking about helping them prepare for what are ways you can advocate for yourself so that you're comfortable as you can be in that setting or for that flight. When I go to my doctors or, different providers' offices, I always am looking to see if they have size inclusive seating. So, that just even looking around the different environments and making sure if I don't see size inclusive seating, that I actually bring that up and I advocate for that. So just some things like that. And then, so intuitive eating is an actual approach that I use. It's an approach to healing food and body image issues, and I use that with clients. And it's based on like 10 specific principles, which I probably don't have time to go into today, but there are lots of books and resources that I have clients check out just to learn more about those principles. But clients, I guide them through that process.
Okay. Like, honestly, that sounds like such a breath of fresh air compared to the usual diet culture noise. Finally making peace with your body instead of constantly fighting it. So it's really great.
Yeah. Okay. And I just wanted to add one thing. Self-compassion is such a big piece of this approach because, as you just said, instead of fighting it, you're really working with it, with the food issues and the food that come up and the self-critical part of yourself that comes up. You're really getting curious and trying to learn more about that and kind of meeting that and supporting it, as opposed to resisting and fighting.
Right, exactly. So, Laura, let's get super practical for a minute. Someone out there right now who is struggling with their body image, maybe feeling stuck in self-criticism or shame, what's one or two small steps that they could take today to start their healing journey?
Yeah. So I would say first, educate yourself. Learn specifically about the Health at Every Size framework. Literally, just if that means you're going to go and Google that, do that. Also educate and learn about intuitive eating. There are as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of good books. I have different ones that even on my Instagram account, I recommend. So first, I'd say educate. Try to educate yourself. Learn as much as you can about the Health at Every Size framework of care and intuitive eating.
Right.
And then I would say seek out Health at Every Size informed providers and providers who are going to use intuitive eating as an approach. And there are different websites you can go to specifically for Health at Every Size providers. I don't know if those, like, we want to list, should I give those to you now, or?
What we can do is we can just add it on our comments, like comment section or the notes itself, note section. So yeah, they can get it from there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So whatever you gave the advices, that's really beautiful. Even just hearing that feels hopeful. Like healing doesn't have to be this massive, overwhelming thing. It's little steps that build over time.
Definitely, yes. Especially when you're trying to take on and really work through food and body image stuff. You know, a lot of people have been battling these things for years. So if you think about it, how many years have you been struggling with food and body image noise? It could be 10 years. And so it's going to take time to undo a lot of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So if someone's thinking about reaching out for therapy but feels scared or unsure, what can they expect from those first few sessions?
Yeah. So for the first few sessions, I am going to be getting to know the client and completing a pretty comprehensive intake with the client to get an idea of their history, their mental health history, and just also life history, from birth all the way up till present day. And if they're seeking therapy specifically for food and body image issues, I'm going to be providing psychoeducation about intuitive eating, health at every size, body diversity, body autonomy, providing education about the fact that body size is actually not an indicator of health, and then addressing any kind of specific areas of concern that they have, and practicing or starting to encourage them to practice some more specific skills. So I'm happy to kind of list out some of those skills or those exercises that I have them do if we have time for that.
Yeah, sure. We can do that. Definitely.
Okay. Yeah. So the first kind of place that we might start is I would recommend that they check out some books if that's a possibility for them, about intuitive eating and health at every size. And we would start to work through the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And another exercise that I often have clients start with is listing out all of their food rules and then challenging them, working in session to act and outside of session to actively start challenging those food rules one at a time. So baby steps. If a client, is at the point where they're ready to decrease the number of times that they're weighing themselves, then that's something we start to work on. And some clients come in and they're ready to throw out the scale completely. And some clients come in and they're ready, they may not be ready to throw out the scale, but they will consider, instead of weighing themselves every day, they might agree to try weighing themselves every other day and slowly start to decrease that. Because we do know weight is not an indicator of health. And then another thing that I help clients work on is practicing eating regularly throughout the day. And that's a way to help them regulate their hunger and fullness cues. And so their hunger and fullness cues, when you're eating, you're eating regularly throughout the day, by regulating your hunger and fullness cues, you're helping to prevent those urges to restrict, or urges to binge. And then I also incorporate somatic therapy techniques to help clients increase something called interoceptive awareness, which essentially just means internal bodily cues like hunger and fullness. So using somatic techniques to help improve that or increase that awareness. Let's see what else. Oh, a big piece of the work I do is helping clients to practice something called mental noting. So kind of starting to become aware of the different parts of themselves that are showing up in relation to food body image issues. And so often there is a pretty strong self-critical part that shows up with some, pretty tough thoughts or self-critical thoughts. And so I work on teaching clients about a mindfulness practice called mental noting, so that they can increase and mindfulness of this self-critical thinking. And once they have more awareness of it, then they can actually do something about it. If they're not aware of it, they can't do anything about it. And then another big practice, and I know this is a lot, and all of this happens like over time, slowly and at the client's pace. And all of this is only, with their consent and if they're willing to try these things. But just a couple more is incorporating a daily body gratitude practice. So instead of focusing on what we appreciate how our body looks, starting to express appreciation for what our body does, like what it allows us to do. So I'm grateful that my body allows me to breathe, to think, to hug the people I love, like things like that, to walk around and move around in my day. And then another thing that's important is if clients are on social media, I encourage them to curate their social media feeds to increase the body diversity that they're exposed to in their social media feeds. And then, as always, when you're dealing with, when you're working with mental health issues or food and body image issues, collaborative care, it is big, it matters. So if a client needs a nutritionist, I will refer them to a health at every size nutritionist. They need a primary care doctor, I'll refer them to a health at every size primary care doctor. And I work with those other providers to provide comprehensive collaborative care.
Right. That's such a reassuring way to put it. Like every point that you mentioned is so helpful, and it's really like whatever you have mentioned, it's really going to help everyone fight with their body type, and they can actually come up confident and feel happy throughout their journey.
Yeah, I sure hope so. That's certainly that's the goal.
Yeah, like therapy doesn't have to be intimidating. It's just two humans working together.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, Laura, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your heart, and your practical advice with us today. I know there are going to be people listening who really needed to hear this, and it's going to help them a lot.
I really hope so. And I'm here and I'm happy to help. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And for everyone tuning in, if you want to connect with Laura or learn more about her work, you can find all the links in our show notes. Thanks for listening to Healing Conversations. And remember, your healing journey is yours and it's worth every step. Thank you.